there, welcome back to another food history video with Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum, partnering with the Great Maryland Recipe Hunt. This month we are going to make some pumpkin soup. Alright, so today's recipe comes from a late 1700s cookbook called The Professed Cook by B. Claremont. Now, it's actually a translation of a slightly earlier French cookbook, Les Soupes de la Cour. Hope I got that French right, also known as the Court Dinners. And it's a very typical French recipe from that time period. So, for this recipe, you're going to need 2 pumpkins. Any pumpkins will do. You don't necessarily need sweet pumpkins like you would if you were making a pumpkin pie. But you do want them to be roughly the same size. So your first pumpkin, you're going to cut the top off of and then roast it. Claremont talks about cutting in designs and doing a lot of decorative work, which is great because this is going to be a centerpiece. I just simply roasted my pumpkin as it is. Just a very light roasting, not as much as if you were going to then eat it. Our other pumpkin got diced up, and we are going to boil it down and create what Claremont calls a marmalade. So you want just a little bit of water, just enough to cover the pumpkin, because we don't want the soup to get too watery. Pumpkin, like the other North American native cultivars, were first domesticated in Mexico in the region of Oaxaca. Along with corn, beans, and other squashes. They were eaten by many peoples throughout the Americas, including the Aztecs, and that was where they first got introduced to Europeans when the Spanish came into modern-day Mexico. They first ate pumpkins with the Aztecs. They then took them back to Europe with them, where they were introduced into the cuisines there. We have recipes for both sweet and savory pumpkin dishes from the 1500s and the 1600s. And our pumpkin soup today is from those food traditions where they took this new ingredient and adapted it into their own classic food traditions. Alright, so our pumpkin has cooked down and I mashed it up a little bit. So now we're going to add in our other ingredients. Now, in historical recipes, they tend to be pretty vague on measurements. They're expecting you to pretty much just do things to taste. So feel free, if you want to make this recipe, to change things up. We're going to do about 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter here. And my butter is still a little bit, I didn't take it out of the fridge quite soon enough, but the soup is still hot, so that'll help melt that down. And now we're going to add in a little bit of sugar and salt. So you don't want too much sugar in here, just maybe about a teaspoon. And then salt is totally to your own taste. I'm going to be pretty generous with the salt though, because I like salty foods. And then somewhere between, I think he says a pint of milk. You want to judge this based on how thick your soup is at the moment. If your soup is a little watery, you don't want to be adding a lot more liquid. I'll give that a mix up. And now we're going to add in our eggs. The recipe calls for 6 eggs, but depending on the size of your eggs, you're going to want to cut that down. Historical eggs were smaller than our eggs today, especially if you're buying like jumbo eggs. You definitely maybe want 4. A large egg, somewhere around 5 to 6, you know. It'll turn out tasty no matter what. Alright. To get the eggs incorporated, I don't want to dump the eggs straight in here. We're going to do what's called tempering. Alright, so to temper the eggs, what you do is you put in some of your mixture into the eggs. If I just add the eggs directly to the hot mixture, it will just scramble them. And then we'll have soup with scrambled eggs, and that is not tasty. Alright, and now I can pour it in. And my eggs won't turn into scramble. So we will return this to our pot back on the heat and cook the soup till it thickens up. Alright, so our soup has cooked down and thickened up a little bit. If you're making this for yourself, don't be afraid to throw in some cornstarch or something to get it to thicken up a little bit on your own. Totally fine to use our modern cookways. So now we're going to ladle it into our pumpkin to serve. Now, my pumpkin is a little over roasted. I admittedly was talking on the phone last night and didn't quite get it out of the oven soon enough. So you don't want it quite this roasted. You can also carve into it if you want. In the original recipe, it talks about carving into it and then piping, honestly, what sounds to me like icing into the carvings, because this is meant to be a centerpiece. The other thing to make it super traditional that we should do is put a little bread down in the bottom of it and then ladle the soup over that bread. I prefer to eat the soup with my bread on the side, so I'm going to skip that step today for us here. But we're just going to ladle this into our pumpkin dish and have a really cool, pretty dish to put on the table. If you're making this for yourself, you also might want to experiment with what kind of spices you put in there. Absolutely, recipes are meant to be done to your taste. So throw in some other spices, experiment with the flavors, and make it the way you like it. And there we go. Pumpkin soup. Alright, that has been another historical cooking video here with Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. Check back next month to see what we make. And don't forget to submit your recipes to the Great Maryland Recipe Hunt. The link will be below. Ooh, smoke in my eyes. Smoke in my eyes. Smoke in my eyes. At least there's no mosquitoes in the smoke.